so I don't love 14mm lenses. I find them expensive and they're bulky, they're heavy, and then, you know, they're not very versatile. I mean, they only do one thing well. So then, okay, what if you look at a 14-24 zoom? Well, those are even bigger and more expensive and heavier. If you go to f2.8, man, they're just like a bowling ball to carry. You can't put filters on it. It's a silly concept. Wait, what the f? I mean, what is this? Look, this is not heavy, it's not bulky, it's not even that expensive, and it's not limited like a fixed 14mm lens. Believe it or not, this is the new Rokinon 14-24mm zoom, f2.8, if you can believe that. It even takes filters. But is this any good? Well, I'm Chris Niccolls, this is PetaPixel, stick around. I want to talk about the storage media that I'm using in my Sony a7R V here. I do rely on the OWC cards. I've got a CFexpress Type A card in here, the Atlas Pro, and I legit use these all the time on our show because they've been reliable and they've been incredibly fast. For my job, I rely on them because first off, I've had no corruption issues with the cards, which is very important when I'm out here on a day of shooting, and also they're fast. I mean, any sort of burst shooting test that I'm doing on cameras, I know that they're not going to be the bottleneck. When I get home, it's really easy to download the photos because rather than have this octopus of all sorts of different card readers, I can simply use this handy OWC adapter. This way I can fit my Type A CFexpress cards into my Type B CFexpress reader, and that really simplifies the whole process. I also really appreciate that OWC has me covered after I buy the product. There's this really handy mobile phone app. It will keep me up to date on the latest firmware updates, which is important when I'm testing all the latest camera gear. I can make sure that they're always going to be compatible and up to date. Then I can use the innergize software for when I get home, and this will actually let me check the health of my cards, make sure that they're working at peak optimal performance, as well as do those firmware updates and more. So first off, big thanks to OWC for sponsoring this episode, and I really think you should check out these products. You can click in the link in the description below to do so. So this lens is the result of a very interesting collaboration between Samyang out of Korea and Schneider-Kreuznach, famous German manufacturer of optics. But this is not labeled in that way. This is labeled as Rokinon, which is identical lens, just this is the distribution in North America under the Rokinon name, but regardless whether you get the Samyang or the Rokinon, it's the same thing. Okay, so let's talk about handling on this lens, because the first thing I pointed out, it is very lightweight, only around 450 grams, less than a quarter of a noct. I mean, for an ultra wide, I was absolutely not expecting that. This lens actually has some really nice controls on it. So nice smooth manual focus ring. You've also got a good zoom ring, and they're actually textured differently, so you can tell which one is which without having to take your eye away from the EVF. I really like that as well. Customizable button, autofocus, manual focus, selector switch. Now there's no aperture ring on the lens, so I gotta control that through the body. Not a big deal. The lens hood itself is a pretty basic plastic affair, just bayonets on, but it seems to work okay. And I really like this about a lot of the new lenses that are coming out third party. A USB-C port built into the side of the body, still weather sealed, don't worry about that. And that lets me keep up to date any firmware that I have to do. So I'm here by the banks of the beautiful Elbow River, and I want to take a shot here, river here, long exposure, put some filters on. And a unique feature about this Rokinon 14-24-28 is that it does use filters. If you consider lenses like the famous Niccolls 14-24 f2.8, beautiful lens, but it's got a fixed lens hood in the front. There's no way to screw in filters. You got to put this contraption on the front and then these very large, very expensive filters so you don't get any vignetting. And it works, but it's bulky. Here, I can throw 77mm filters right onto the front of this lens, but there is an issue. So, at 14mm, I can only get one standard thickness 77mm filter on there. Anything beyond that, if I put a polarizer or something or stack, I'm going to see the actual edges of the filter in the frame. And in this case, I like to use a magnetic filter system. It's really nice to use. These are the Maven magnetic filters. I love them. They work fantastic, but it involves a stepping ring here to go from 77 to 82, then my magnetic ring, and then the actual filter. And I am seeing the edges of the filter at 14mm, unfortunately, as you can see here. So in order to use this setup, I have to go out to about 16mm. That takes care of it. If I double stack two regular 77mm filters, I gotta go to something like 17mm in order to avoid this. So long story short, depending on what filter system you use, you might have an issue here. You're basically stuck with one single 77mm filter. so I'm taking the shot from the shore, and I mean, it's fine, but I kind of feel like I want to be there in the water. It's probably not going to work out, but I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, so while I wait for my feet to dry off, so I can put my shoes back on, let's talk about bokeh. So first off, I'm going to preface this with saying, look, this is an ultra-wide lens. When it comes to bokeh, I'm not too harsh on these lenses because it's rare that you're going to have such shallow depth of field. But for close-up shots, you can certainly get it. And looking here, you can see shooting at f2.8, it's actually quite nice. A little bit of cat's eye effect, not that much though. Slight soap bubble look to the specular highlights, but the background still looked fairly soft and smooth. There's not a lot of harshness going on there. If you stop the lens down, you know, you get a bit more of a polygonal shape. I mean, this is not like a 15-blade aperture or anything, but regardless, I think the bokeh is actually quite pretty. And in the rare situations where you're gonna need that shallow background because you're focusing close, you'll be pleased. So the autofocus motor in this Rokinon lens, I mean, nothing fancy, it's a stepping motor, but this is an ultra-wide zoom, so I can forgive it. I mean, focusing's quiet, it's plenty quick enough from near to far. No issues. I mean, an ultra-wide lens, you don't really need to have brilliantly fast focusing. Maybe if you're doing something like skateboarding or something where you have like a really fast action pursuit, it might not be able to keep up, but in most situations, it'd be just fine. Okay, so a lens like this, very wide, you know, shooting landscapes, you're gonna get the sun in the shot. How does it handle flare? Well, this is actually kind of surprising because I think this is a weak point on the Rokinon. So first off, contrast is very well maintained. That's not an issue. I was happy with the overall contrast. The problem is ghosting, quite a bit of ghosting. And as you can see here, it gives this very vivid rainbow pattern. Even when shooting wide open at f2.8, you're gonna get these big rainbow globs that are very distracting. And you close the lens down, it just becomes more of like a trumpet shape. But again, rainbow, vivid, draws the eye. Kind of cool, but not something that I would really want in my landscape photos all the time. What about the Sunstars? Pretty average. I wasn't really blown away by them, nothing amazing there. So you gotta be careful with this lens. So this 14-24 is actually pretty handy for the occasional close-up shot. It actually does an impressive just under 1:4 life-size reproduction at the 24mm range. But I don't have much working distance. I mean, from the sensor plane, I have to be roughly just over 6 inches away, 7 inches away from the sensor. That means my working distance is like 1.5 inches. So that means hood is coming off here, and I'm absolutely like getting my shadow over everything. I gotta really move around a lot to make sure that I'm not putting the shadow of the lens on the shot. But I do like the fact that it's nice and sharp when focusing up close like that. For the occasional detail or kind of semi-macro shot, it's a lot of fun. Hey, it's Chris here to talk about video, and this Rokinon 14-24 is very interesting because it's hard to find 14-24 lenses like this that take filters and are this lightweight for gimbal work. Now, I did want to check the breathing. That's where your field of view changes as you focus the lens from near to far. And as you can see here at both ends, we are getting a little bit of breathing, but it's not bad. 14mm and 24mm, it's still usable. Now, if I put this on a gimbal, the lightweight is really nice, but I do wish that it wouldn't shift the weight as much when I zoom the lens. But overall, I think this is a fantastic lens for most video work. Okay, so surely a lens that comes this wide, that's this small and compact and affordable is gonna have some compromises to sharpness. Well, the answer to that is yes and no. I mean, when it comes to 14mm, no compromises at all. This is incredibly sharp. Shooting wide open at f2.8, you know, maybe a little bit less contrast, but still great detail. Stopping the lens down just improves that slightly, but it's already good wide open. The other thing is the corners are also pretty decent at f2.8. Focus specifically there. You can see good detail. Definitely gets better at 5.6. And I also like that this lens shoots quite flat at 14mm. So even if I'm shooting wide open at f2.8, if the center of my composition's in focus and the corners are too, they'll both be relatively sharp. Unfortunately, it's the 24mm range that we have a few issues here. And this is too bad because I know a lot of people are going to want to shoot 14mm, absolutely, and it's doing a great job. But when I shoot landscapes like this, I often like to shoot around that 22 to 24mm focal range. And you can see sharpness here on our charts, wide open at f2.8. It's a little bit soft. It does definitely get better when you stop the lens down. And that is how I'm going to shoot most of my landscapes, so that's okay. But looking at the corners here at f2.8, they're pretty soft and there's some vignetting. And even when I stop the lens down to f5.6, they're still not great. Like there's still a touch of softness there in the extreme corners. As well, although this lens shoots incredibly flat at 14 millimeters, it doesn't shoot very flat at 24 millimeters. So you can see here, if the center's in focus, those corners are way off. So you specifically got to focus in subjects off center if that's what your composition is going to be. So what a handy little walk around travel lens this is for landscape. I really enjoyed it because it is so lightweight and compact, and yet it's giving me everything that I would want. I mean, having the filters, having the f2.8 aperture, you know, all fitting in this small weather seal package is pretty amazing. There are some issues that we've talked about. I got to watch the sun, I got to watch flare issues, but honestly, the aperture and the sharpness, I have that 2.8 at 14 millimeter where I'm probably going to use a lot for astral or something like that, and it does a great job there. And if I'm shooting traditional landscapes, I'm going to stop the lens down in almost all situations, so sharpness won't be a factor there. You know, as far as competition goes, this is actually very unique because, yes, you've got things like the Sony G Master 12-24, f2.8, awesome lens, but it's huge, heavy, very expensive, and it doesn't take filters. Then I could go to something like, well, the 16-25 f2.8 or Sigma, you know, Tamron, they make 16 and 17-28 f2.8s. Great lenses as well, but I think there'll be a lot of people out there on the market that just want that little extra width, maybe for interiors or for architectural work or ultra-wide landscapes, and this is absolutely going to fit the bill. So I think that this is a great value for a dollar travel and landscape lens. Let me know if you agree in the comments below. We appreciate your feedback. Check out the PetaPixel podcast on the same channel, or you can listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps. Definitely consider getting a PetaPixel.com membership. It helps support our more interesting projects where you get to travel and do some really cool stuff for you guys. You can get that for only $3 a month or $30 a year, 25% off the merch store. You get to peruse the website ads free, and you can download our sample galleries of JPEGs and RAWs so you can test these lenses for yourself. Thanks so much for joining us. Big thanks to OWC for sponsoring this episode. We'll see you soon with more on PetaPixel.